All right, guys. Hi, hello, good morning. What we got going on today is we're going to be moving on through time. Again, when we last talked, we talked about the election of 1968 and how, well, the year 1968 was it was a doozy for America, with lots of violence and chaos and confusion, and it's going to result in a major power shift from the Democrats through that JFK and LBJ, and that they controlled the government. And now we're moving into an era of Republicans, again headed up by one Mr. Richard Nixon. So we're going to talk a little bit about Richard Nixon, specifically with Vietnam in this unit. We'll talk more about him again in the next, and the other things that he did, obviously the more notorious. But we're going to take some notes, so you should have your notebooks out, and we're going to kind of get right into it, all right? So in 1968, in a unsurprising turn of events, Richard Nixon is going to win the election. You'll remember that he has run for president before when he faced off against JFK in 1960, and he again suffered a pretty surprising loss. This time, not so much. He wins both the popular and not all of them, most of the electoral votes. So he very handily comes into the White House. And of course, with us in this unit, we're just going to talk about how he handles the Vietnam situation. LBJ, in his last big address to the country, had stated that he was going to start to pull back and change the policy in Vietnam. In order to do that, a series of negotiations had to start happening. And, well, those negotiations weren't going anywhere. Again, both sides were both very unwilling to compromise. Again, we wanted all of the VC, the Viet Cong, the Vietnamese communists in the South, to get out of there, to go up to the north, and to again basically remove communism and its voice from the South overall, and then let South Vietnam just stay democratic, stay not communist. And Ho Chi Minh in the north were like, nah, we just want you guys to go. And then we'll create some kind of coalition between ourselves and the South. And that'll be how we go forward. And again, this is not your fight. That's basically what they kept coming down to. This is not your fight. Again, this is between ourselves, and you guys just need to scoot and skedaddle. And even though the negotiations with Ho Chi Minh and the North are not going well, Nixon is coming in with a plan. Again, he has an advisor who is, again, is a very famous political figure if you're really actually into political science. Henry Kissinger, who is a German-born, he's a security advisor basically to Nixon throughout his presidency, and he proposes this idea that's called Vietnamization. It's a very fun, interesting word. But it basically states that we're going to slowly pull our troops out of Vietnam, like we basically said we would, and we would allow ARVN, which was a group we haven't talked about so much because really, which is the South Vietnamese, to take over the fighting. So it's this idea of kind of handing over more and more of the actual conflict to the South Vietnamese, who we had taken control from as things continued on in this manner. The idea here is that if we slowly but surely, again, give this fight over to the South Vietnamese, that we'll be able to leave Vietnam with honor. Peace with honor is what Nixon kept telling the country, that this is the only way for us to be able to maintain our dignity and to hold our heads up high as we basically, again, we're quitting, we're leaving. There's nothing left to be done in Vietnam. He wanted to be able to preserve our clout. Clout is a fancy word for saying like saving face. It's to make us look like we're not weak, like we're not giving up, we're not just again walking away. We're trying our best to create some kind of stable situation, even though it's war and there is no such thing. This peace with honor is undermined and our trust as an American public in Nixon is shaken when he authorizes bombing of both Laos and Cambodia. So even though some guys are coming home, we're still very actively involved in not Vietnam necessarily, but in the two countries directly to the west. The reasons that Nixon gives to once we find out about these, because again, we didn't know at first, that he kept it from us, was that there were Viet Cong sanctuaries and the Ho Chi Minh Trail along the outside of the country. And well, Nixon wanted to keep our enemies guessing that we were kind of capable of anything, that we would go out and we would bomb the neighbors even as we're leaving the war. Again, the whole thing is, again, it's sneaky and it's definitely something that, again, a little bit of a red flag that maybe we should have paid closer attention to, but that's okay. We'll get into that next unit, right? So the thing about it is that after Nixon comes into office and after more and more of our guys start coming home, and then, of course, we find out about all of this sort of secret planning and the bombing in Cambodia and the invasion and all of this stuff. Man, oh man. More and more comes out and comes to light that it just further shakes our confidence in our government. Again, it's like I said, we're going through a massive transformation as an American people, as a group who, and from World War II to Vietnam, over that span of time, we just are so different. And one of the things that, again, shakes us to our cores, again, is a particular, mm, again, moment from the Vietnam conflict that gets out amongst the American people, which is referred to as the My Lai Massacre. So remember, one of our strategies for trying to, again, wear down our enemy, the battle of attrition, involved search and destroy missions, which had American platoons, troops going into villages and basically destroying everything, very often hurting, killing people, in search of VC agents, of those communists in the South. And again, news eventually travels back to the United States that a platoon went into the small village of My Lai and massacred everyone. They killed everyone, men, women, children, the elderly. This was a shocking thing. I mean, war is bloody and terrible, but that's like way beyond the acceptable modes of engagement. We talked about this in World War II with again the violence and the idea of war crimes. This was something that we as an American people always had a lot, still do. I'm not saying we don't. We always had a kind of an implicit respect for our guys who go off and fight. We would never expect them to do something so intensely brutal and terrible. And when these guys come back, they're going to be held accountable, or at least that's what we assume as an American people. They are going to be put on trial for doing something that is way above and outside of the realm of what you're supposed to do in, again, civilized combat, basically. And they're going to use a defense that the Nazis did. And I'm not saying these guys are Nazis. I'm just saying that it's the same basic situation where soldiers are going to say that were not responsible for this, that they should not be held accountable for the bloodshed in My Lai because they were just following orders. Um, and we do get some kind of vindication through this, that it was the commanding officer, and he's the one who gets convicted and imprisoned for telling his soldiers to do this. But this is something that really, again, it just showcases how bad things have gotten and how this conflict has changed us, not just the people at home, but also the people who are fighting, and they're going through absolute hell. And the fact that they again, even feel like this is okay, even if it was an order that none of them even felt the need to question it is yeah, it's a really intense situation. The next thing that happens, so again, Nixon is elected in 68. Obviously, he doesn't get into the White House until the January of 69. And throughout the whole year of 69, we have all of these various things going on. There's the secret bombing happening, and our Vietnamization is going on. And then in April of 1970, he as we're like again, we're just like, please bring our guys home. We just need to be done with this conflict. Yeah, no, he invades Cambodia. He takes the guys who are still in Vietnam and he launches a full-scale invasion of Cambodia to the west of Vietnam. Again, this what he offers to us as an explanation is that he's clearing out communist supply centers, again, those Ho Chi Minh Trail kind of caches. And when this happens, it's like again, it sets everyone off once more. I mean, things had sort of cooled after 68. We spent a year kind of recouping, and we felt like, okay, well, they heard us. They're listening to us. They're going to do something about this. And when the invasion happens, protests break out all across the country. 1,200 different campuses with young people whose friends, whose relatives are over fighting this fight that again, I'm not saying no one, there's still people committed to the Vietnam and think that we can win, but gosh, it really is just such a it's a tough situation to think about that we're just like, please just bring them home. You told us you were going to Nixon, and instead you've opened a war in another front. Um, the thing about this invasion, not only did it reignite the passions of a lot of the young people in the country as how much they disliked this, but he didn't ask for permission. Again, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which was created to allow LBJ to kind of, again, use our military like a tool whenever necessary, that was a huge change. It had given the president a lot of power to be able to do kind of whatever he wants with our military. And Congress is like, whoa, wait, we should pull that back because obviously presidents are going to do things that are not going to fit into our overall. So he had no permission to do this. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution is going to be revoked, taken away. And again, a push for ending this conflict even faster is going to start to come down the line. Before 1970 is out, we do have one more kind of huge scandal that breaks in regards to this conflict we've been fighting. And it is the publishing of the Pentagon Papers. So, the Pentagon Papers is a 7,000 page document, basically, that outlined all of the plans and strategies that LBJ and his cabinet had put together. Excuse me. The thing about this and why this is so, of course, just shocking to us as an American people is that it's just one more situation that reinforces the fact that our government doesn't tell us everything. This plan in the Pentagon Papers was created by LBJ before he was elected in 64, and it didn't have an exit strategy. He was fully prepared to commit us fully to this fight in Vietnam, and he was prepared to keep us there indefinitely until we won. And this is just further evidence of the credibility gap. The fact that the government is only telling us a teeny little bit, and then there's this huge vastness behind that is being kept from us as a country, things that are directly impacting us. Again, there's a lot of things, and again, I'm not saying that government should be 100% transparent because that would be chaos, but this is important. And LBJ straight up lied to our faces during the election of 64. So did Nixon in 68. They're telling us one thing and just going and having a totally set plan for another. It's not like things changed in a moment. No. They were ready to make these decisions. They just weren't telling us about it because they were manipulating us. And of course, that makes us very distrustful going forward overall. Before we end today, there is one particular moment in the aftermath of the invasion of Cambodia, Kent State, that I want to just talk about. So this happens in more than one campus, but this is one of the instances where, again, it just showcases how whew, violent everything is in the country during this time. Kent State University is a university in Ohio. And after the invasion of Cambodia is announced to the country, there is a big protest that happens where an ROTC building gets burnt down in protest, a demonstration. So just think about this. We had teach-ins at the beginning of this protesting, and now we're burning down buildings. That is the escalation that's happened over the course of 5 years. And ROTC is basically the military training program that allows for students to go to college and then they have to serve. It's a kind of like a deal. Um, when this happens, of course, the National Guard is sent there to kind of break it up. And when the National Guard arrives, they're face to face with this group of protesters on campus out in the open, and they shoot into the crowd because they were throwing rocks at them. It's a very intense exchange. Again, people are not exactly sure how it all really happens here. In the ensuing melee, in the craziness that goes down after the shots are fired, 9 people will be injured and 4 will be dead. 2 of which, and this is the tragic part of this, 2 of which were not protesting at all. They were just walking on campus. It was classic case, wrong place, wrong time. And it's a very controversial moment in, again, our history because it really shakes loose and brings to light the divisions of our country once again. Like I said, throughout 69, things had kind of cooled off. There wasn't quite as much protesting, there wasn't quite as much chaos. But as more and more things happened, and then, of course, the invasion of Cambodia reignites all of our anger. Of course, after the Kent State shooting, after the death of these students and the injury of these students, again, some people are going to fall further into outrage. They're going to be more committed to getting out of Vietnam. And then there's the other side of the people who have said, well, again, this is what happens when when you protest, when you actively disagree with the government. Again, they put themselves into danger, and that's what happens when you put yourself into danger. Those people are the ones who are much more committed to the fight. Again, there's a new group that comes forward called the Hard Hats, which are people who are kind of like, again, rallying for support of the government. Again, 100,000 members are going to show up to talk about this. They get the name Hard Hat because they're construction workers for the most part. And again, it just shines a light on that decision. Where do you fall? Are you a dove? Do you think we need to get out of Vietnam? Are you a hawk? Do you think we just need to keep pushing? Or are you somewhere in the middle still? There's not a lot of people in the middle, is what I'm getting at here. Okay. By the time we get to 1970, things as a nation, we're still very much divided, and everyone is kind of picking sides. Um, Even though the invasion of Cambodia goes smoothly, I suppose. I mean, again, it's really not. There's not a lot for us to fight against in Cambodia. It's a very different situation than what's happening in Vietnam at that time. Again, we keep fighting. Again, the fighting that goes in Cambodia does not mean we stop fighting in Vietnam. We are going to just continue and actually renew our efforts a little bit, but nothing changes. It all stays sort of the same. Every time we wipe out a cache of Vietnamese, again, agents, another pops up, and we keep trying, but nothing seems to really change. And well, tomorrow we're going to talk about how this comes to an end because it has to. We're exhausted as an American people, and nothing is changing, and it is time for us to be done and to bow out of Vietnam, and that's where we'll be tomorrow. So that's it for notes. Oh, I forgot. There is this image. This is a picture that ran in the aftermath of the Kent State massacre. Again, not massacre, shooting. You can see here, it's a really arresting image. If we were together in class, there would be a little activity we'd do with this, but since we're not, I just want you to see it. Again, this person right here is a casualty of this conflict, and this picture is so interesting because, again, there's so much going on, and it visually is really just, it like pulls at your heartstrings, is what I'd like to say. It was captured in the moment, and it ran in papers all across the country. It was shown on, again, news reports, and it had a lot to do, the visuals of Vietnam have a lot to do with informing people's opinions of it. Okay. So, work to be completed. Again, you got lectures and reminders and stuff. Again, you've got an item due tomorrow by the end of the school day, which is the anti-war movement. Read like a historian. Again, the why did Americans oppose the war. Again, on Monday, I'm going to be checking that you guys have started work on your local history part 2. Again, that's part of the rubric, is working on it, things like that. Check out the how-to lecture, the video. Again, I'm going to put those examples up soon so you guys can see like a finished product, what it looks like. Overall, the enrichment item, I'm going to be updating it with a couple of things soon. So again, just keep a lookout for that, and I hope you guys have a good day.